Revelation 14:6 is our memory verse. Revelation 14:6. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. Part of Jesus coming again is a call to holiness, a call to worship our Maker, our Creator. And did you know that that call is in the middle of the Ten Commandments? You ever thought about that? Exodus 20. It says in verse 10. Exodus 20, verse 10. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So it says right there, He made the heavens, He made the earth, He made the sea, and He made all that is in them. How about that? We've thought about that. That's right in the Ten Commandments. And what's the biggest thing denied these days? We're told God didn't make the earth. The earth made itself. There were small animals, and they became larger animals, and they became larger animals, and they became larger animals, and some of them became people. I remember learning about that when I was a little kid in school. I remember going to my grandma's house, and I mentioned that because I had heard that. And she just gave me a good question. Well, why isn't that still happening today? I said, what do you mean? Well, have you ever met any monkeys that turned into people? No. Monkeys are monkeys and the people are people. Yeah, and it's always been that way. And certainly, if that change had been happening, it'd be happening today. I can't disagree with that logic. And right then, I decided that the idea that this world made itself is a big fat lie. And I like to listen to lectures on the YouTube. And there's a man who immigrated here from India. I think he understands the whole American ideal better than most Americans do. And he keeps talking about the big lie. And Joseph Goebbels worked for Adolf Hitler. And they concocted some big lies. Some big lies. And they pontificated that a big lie is easier to get accepted than a little lie. Because if you have a little lie, like if I went to Dwayne and I said, you know your neighbor stole your car, he'd go out and see his car in his own driveway. He said, no, I don't think the neighbor stole my car. It's still right here. I've got the keys. But if I went and told Dwayne that Pastor Wright had killed 100 people, how's he going to disprove that? Where's he going to look? He wouldn't want to call a pastor because, what are you talking about? And he'd have to come up with an explanation. The big lie. The big lie. Yes, Dwayne.
I saw that illustrated the other day. I was watching the news, and every once in a while the news, they have a lot of ads that come on, explanations for future programs. And in that quick little interview, they interviewed an astronaut. They didn't say who his name was. I hadn't seen him before on anything. But he was describing the thrill and excitement of being up there away from the world, our world, this world, the world we know, and how wonderful it was. And then he went into the big lie and described this evolutionary process. And described, here we are now. When he finished, he was glorifying himself and the intellect of all the scientists now who have created this astronaut system and this flight system, this other world, and they had done it, and it was the brain. Ended up describing the brain as being the greatest thing in the world, the brain.
Yes.
There was truth in what he was saying, that God's gift to man enabled him to do things, but he made God. That became God. That became God. That was God.
Yes.
What's next? What's next? What are we going to be able to accomplish next?
Well, the very best lies are 99 and 9/10 absolute truth. And you put that lie in there. Like the first lie we have recorded in the Bible, we had Satan say to Eve when she said, if you eat the fruit of that tree, you will surely die. And he said, ye shall not surely die, you shall be as God. And ever since then, most of mankind has said, well, when you die, you don't really die. You move on, you progress. And I still remember this conversation like it was just the other day. I've told this story before, and I'll probably tell it again. There was an evening I'd been down to Indio, and I was selling insurance at the time, and I'd met a couple of families there. And I was living with my grandmother. I was a bachelor then. She asked me to bring home a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk. So I stopped in the supermarket there to pick up a bottle of milk and a loaf of bread. And there was a man there with a big box, and he was asking people to donate to send children to Christian summer camp. And when I came out of the door, he asked me the question, brother, are you saved? And I said, I certainly believe so. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in salvation. And I've accepted his sacrifice on my behalf. He says, well, that sounds right. Do you fellowship? And I said, yes, I do. Where do you go? I said, well, I attend the Seventh-day Adventist Church on Sunrise Way in Palm Springs. And he said, oh, you're a Seventh-day Adventist. I said, yes. And he said, I know about you. You're the people that teach that when you die, you really die. Yeah, that when you die, you really die. And I said, yes. And I told him that story about Satan. And you know what his reaction was to that story? He said, and he was right. I said, really, I don't want to talk to you anymore, because anyone who believes Satan over the Lord Jesus and is collecting money sends kids to Christian summer camp. I just don't understand you, and I went on my way. And see, we have someone in a walker at the front door there. Anyway, we need to believe the Lord. Yes. tell.
Do you know where the old Greyhound station used to be in Park Place?
Yeah.
I was 16 years old, and a man walked up to me when I was 16 years old, and that was some years that go way back in the 50s. He says, which way to go to heaven? And I mean, he really hit me hard, because I didn't know. I tried to tell it the best way I knew now. But if I could see that man right now, I would tell him, Jesus Christ, he said, I am the way, the life, and the truth.
Yes.
And so I didn't know then. I was just a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't an Adventist, and I didn't know much about the Bible. I knew Jesus Christ, but he died for us, but didn't know much about it. And so I think about that sometimes. That man come up to me and he just asked me which way to heaven. And just like you said, that man asked you the question.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's a good question. We have a little later in Genesis, we have the first promise made. We had the first lie that came before the first promise. But the first promise is found in Genesis 3:15. He said to the fallen pair that hope would come through the seed of the woman. So they knew the Savior was coming. That put Satan on notice that the Savior was coming, and he kept track. All the babies born. Eve, every time she had a son, is this the one? Is this the one? They had no concept it would be 6,000 years. No concept at all. 6,000 years are up. We're in overtime right now as far as I'm concerned. And yet, we have so many people that are waiting for that day. Let's look, we've already looked at Revelation 14:6, but let's look at Matthew 24:14. Matthew 24:14. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. So the gospel, the saving gospel of Jesus Christ, we have in Revelation 14 that it will be proclaimed. We have in Matthew 24 that it will be preached. And let's look at the conclusion in Matthew 28. 19. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So, we proclaim, we preach, we harvest, we reap. So that is our goal.
That's what you call the marching on.
That's right. And who do we reach? Is there anyone, anywhere that has not been affected by sin? We read that Adam's fall in Eden has impacted every human being. No nation or tribe of people has been immune. We all face the immediate consequences of sin without a remedy, we all would face the ultimate consequence, eternal death. Everyone needs to know the great hope of what God has offered them in Jesus Christ. This is why Seventh-day Adventists have gone throughout all the world seeking to bring the message of Jesus to all who have not yet heard it. I want to point out that everyone is important to Jesus. He didn't just die for the educated. He didn't just die for those that love him. He didn't just die for the smart people. He didn't just die for the people who behave themselves. He died also for the ignorant. He also died for mean people. He also died from the loftiest, richest person to the poorest of the poor. Everyone is important in the eyes of Jesus. I still remember seeing the reports of this little shack in Africa where this man was living there on $12 a year. Yet his brother was the President of the United States. What a contrast. What a huge contrast. Yes. It's, and yet neither one is more important to God. Jesus died for both of them. Look at Luke 23. And we want verses 32 to 43. And just imagine this, Jesus is hanging on the cross, and on one side of him is a thief on the cross that's deriding him. And on his other side is another thief who has had that moment that cleared up his thinking. And he realizes, this is the Son of God. I'm beside the Son of God. He is my only hope. It says there in verse 32, there were also two others, criminals, led with him to be put to death. And when they had come to the place called Calvary, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right hand and the other on the left. And then Jesus said, speaking of all the people there, he said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And they divided his garments and cast lots. And the people stood looking on, but even the rulers with them sneered, saying, he saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ, the chosen of God. The soldiers also mocked him, offering him sour wine, and saying, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. They kind of had their moment in glory, didn't they? And an inscription also was written over him in letters of Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. This is the King of the Jews. Then one of the criminals who were hanged blasphemed him, saying, you are the Christ, save yourself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Do you not even fear God, seeing you under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, where we receive the due rewards of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, assuredly, I say unto you today, you will be with me in paradise. Say unto you today, you will be with me in paradise. That thief just passed the judgment. He didn't have long to live in this world, but he had the promise of eternity. We have that promise too. And sometimes we're so bogged down in this world, we don't realize what a wonderful promise that is. Do we think about heaven? Do we think about what it would be like there? I have been in some homes that are wonderful homes. I've been in the White House, and that's a spectacular home. That is a wonderful place. I've been in Leonard Firestone's home, in Rancho Mirage. It's right next door to Gerald Ford's home, and I parked in the wrong place, and the Secret Service came out right away and told me to move my car. And I said, yes, sir, and I did it. I was in a spectacular home. I had known for years that Ironwood Country Club had another gate inside. I had a friend that lived there, and the ones that lived inside the second gate, they had constant patrol. I understand that they were connected with bad people, with people call them the mafia, or organized crime, or things like that, or they just had special security needs. And that's where they lived. You could get inside Ironwood Country Club, but you could not get inside that without an extra pass. Well, only one time, on one occasion, did I go in there. With the mortuary, we worked for two national shipping services that help reunite people home. They work as a go-between between the mortuary where they're supposed to go and getting them there. Well, I didn't know until that evening that there's a third gate in Ironwood Country Club. And so I passed through the second gate. That was the only time I've ever done it. And then I passed through the third gate, and there were 5 homes, 5 mansions inside that third gate, very secure. And just to set the pace for my mood, that night, Bruce and I had been out picking up a man that passed away in a borrowed room from some friends. He didn't have any money. The friends called us to pick him up. And we had taken him to the mortuary, and he was a penniless man, and it was his friend's charity who was going to take care of him. And a little while later, we had a call to go to the Ironwood Country Club, as we were given passes. We had our pictures taken when we got there. Very high security. So we went through that second gate. We went through the third gate, and we went to one of those mansions. The lady who passed away in there, she was 90 years old, and she owned 3 banks in the East, in New York City and other cities. She owned 3 banks. as she was very wealthy. And her hired help, her domestic help, didn't speak Spanish. She had vases that were over 1,000 years old in there. She was very wealthy, but you know, she was placed on that same gurney. We had that man that had no home, was living in a borrowed bedroom, and she was on that same gurney. You know, Jesus, we're all equal. You could own a dozen banks, and you wouldn't be any different to Jesus than that man who died in a borrowed bed in a borrowed bedroom belonging to a friend. It's hard sometimes to sum things up to make them understandable, but those are two very different lifestyles, two very different worlds. The worlds of the ultra wealthy and the ultra poor. And so what are we to teach? It says here, did Jesus quote one of his earlier sermons, such as, "Unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven"? Did he say to that thief that was repenting? No. He just told him, you have the blessed hope. You have a home in glory. Sometimes we get too worried about the method and the formula of salvation rather than the reality of salvation. The reality is, it's up to Jesus Christ, no matter which formula we follow. If we approach Jesus and he is accepting to us. Yes, ma'am.
You know, here in verse 43 of Luke chapter 23,
Yes.
it says, Jesus said to him, "Surely I say to you," and of course they have an apostrophe right there, "today you will be with me in paradise." But if you go over to John chapter 20, verse 17, over there, Jesus is speaking, and this is right after, this is Sunday morning, this is resurrection morning, and Jesus says to Mary, he says, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God." So I've used that text to show people that even Jesus didn't go directly to heaven. And
That's
there's
right.
a verse over in Acts,
Mhm.
the beginning of Acts, look it up yet, but where it says that David, and we all know how well David was loved by the Jewish nation, and there's a verse over here in Acts. I found in Acts chapter 2, and it's verse 29. It says, "Men and brethren, let me speak to you freely for the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried, and in his tomb, and his tomb is with us to this day." So there's two examples right there that I have thrown people. And what it is that they don't think. See, the Bible is a thinking through process. And a lot of times we don't think and search.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And that's why the big lie is so effective, because so many people believe it. So many people believe it, and it's reported widely, and it's generally accepted as fact. And yet, when I come and I say, I don't believe it. I believe the Lord made the earth. I believe that we're a special creation of Jesus Christ, that we're His crown work. We are made in His image. And He has blessed mankind. We're the only creature that has a conscience. How do you explain that? Monkeys don't have any conscience. My dogs certainly don't have any conscience. They have instinct. They have instinct. We have training from our parents. And we're taught the golden rule. And we're taught to believe in salvation. And I think it's interesting that these days, even the Pope talks about evolution as truth. And yet, I'm sure people snicker behind my back, but kind of, what's wrong with me for not believing what everyone says is true and is scientific? And then people tell me there's nothing better than science. And my answer to that is, well, it used to be scientific that the sun rotated around the earth. That used to be scientific. And that's been disproved. It used to be scientific to attach leeches to people to bleed out their fever. And they did that. Killed George Washington doing that. It used to be scientific that smoking tobacco was good for you. Yes, yes. And many other people. It used to be scientific that when people had orthopedic surgery, they had to be in bed for weeks for the wound to heal. And then they had to learn to walk all over again so that they could get up. Nowadays, a few hours after the surgery, they had you up and about to keep your muscles in tone. There's so many things that science has reversed itself on. Yes, ma'am.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize is that most science that we have today came, if you look back who the scientist was that came up with the basis of our science, they were Christians. They were Bible-believing, Bible-based Christians. In fact, that was how they figured hand washing to stop the bleeding process, because in the Bible it says that life is in the blood. And another thing I asked an evolutionist one time, I said, well, if we're higher forms of creatures, then why is it, because I've had horses and raised horses, and I said, why is it that a colt they're up immediately, and other animals are up immediately, and zebra is up immediately, and then a human baby, it can't even roll over for the first few weeks or whatever. Can't even walk for months. And then why is it, if we are higher form, there are animals that have way better eyesight and hearing than we do. There are animals that outlive us. So then they're like, oh, I never thought about that.
That's right. And my pet peeve, and I think it's the current big lie, I don't know how any of you feel about that. And frankly, whatever you feel about it, I'm going to feel my way anyway. And that is the lie carbon dioxide is heating this earth. I remember being in first grade. My teacher, Mrs. Moyer, had plants all over the classroom. We had all kinds. She must have had 100 plants in there. And I remember some of us saying, you must really like plants. She says, I don't especially like them, But I want you kids to learn real good. And I want an oxygen-rich room for you to learn in. And we're breathing in oxygen and we're breathing out carbon dioxide. And all these 100 plants are breathing in carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen. So there's more oxygen in this room so you little kids can learn. And your brains will be oxygenated. And yet, we're told by so many people, and some of these people said that New York City and Miami would already be underwater more than 15 years ago. And the last I heard, New York City is still there, just the way it's been. And Miami is still on land, it's not underwater. And I made up my mind that they have so much of this to scare the pants off us. Now really, if you want to be scared, you should be scared of the judgment day. Jesus is coming again, whether we are ready or not. And besides that, aren't some of the last plagues that the earth is going to be hotter than it's ever been? And so on and so forth. So, yes, we're going to be good stewards of God's workmanship, and we should not do things. But you know, if you want to rid the world of becoming heavier and heavier with carbon dioxide, get out and plant some plants and plant some trees. The Lord has a cure for anything. We have in the Bible, we have so many things that the Lord has set up that are good for us. Sister Alicia, do you have something to share?
Yes.
Okay.
We were celebrating Memorial Day
Yes.
at the school. Some of you were not here when we gave a little gift. If you want one, raise your hand. More. Okay. And this you can place in your gardens in memory of anybody who you have known that was in the service. Anybody else?
When we get to the bottom of this lesson, the bottom line is Christ has made atonement for us. The price has been paid. Our good works are just that. They are good works to honor Christ, to honor our love for Christ, and to proclaim to the world that we have salvation. But our works do not make salvation for us. Jesus made salvation for us. And I think we're concluded. It's time for the lesson to conclude. I'd like to ask our superintendent to pray for us as we
And before I do that,
Yes.
so now let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for this wonderful Sabbath and all the messages that you have given us so far. This has been a great Sabbath school, a good lesson, and an opportunity for us to reflect about our lives, our relationship with you. So keep blessing us today. Send a special blessing to each person here, this group of wonderful sons and daughters that you love so much. And make us, Lord, the best Christians that can do a good work in this area and be really a light for the neighborhood. So use us, teach us, guide us, and keep on loving us. I ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.